YouTube. So I'm finally going to get around to that 10K Q&A. I didn't get to it last week because my family was sick. I was sick. I really was. I announced that in the last video, and I guess some people took something else from that, but I just had a coughing fit because my whole family was sick. So anyway, I apologize for how long it's taken, but I'm finally getting to it. I really appreciate all your subscriptions and comments and all your support, and especially those of you who bought my book. I really appreciate it. It's cool to see the channel finally growing. I think it's actually, I think we're at like 10,600 as of the writing of this. So it's been a little bit since 10K, which is it's crazy that it's growing that much now because I think I started in like it's probably like 2012 or somewhere around then. So it's over 10 years old. Just never did that much with it. I kind of gave it up. I kick myself for that now because obviously it was much easier to grow back in the day. But on the flip side, I didn't really have that much useful to share at that time, and I do now. So even though it's late and I kind of missed the boat on being a big YouTube superstar, I'm coming at you with like actual good information, experience. I think I'm coming at you confidently with a useful message and just valuable information to share. So I think it's the better time anyway. But yeah, let me go ahead and get into the Q&A. I've got my coffee, my sparkling water, all that good stuff. So I think we can just go ahead and get to all the questions. You'll have to bear with me because I think I have them on multiple posts. I had a main post asking for questions, but then I also solicited questions on another video. So anyway, we'll get through them. And I'll probably be doing more of these coming up because you know, I don't know what questions you guys have. I have to try to, figure out what's going to be most interesting and valuable, but often I learn, more about what I should actually be talking about just from what people ask me. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. That is actually something I should be saying. So we'll probably be doing a lot more of these, probably a lot more lives as well in the future. I I've tried one and I liked it a lot. So we'll be doing more of that in the future. But anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so my first question is from Anonymous 10282. I guess I'm just gonna say everybody's name. Let me know if you guys care about that or not, but you know, I'll I'll go ahead and start doing that unless it gets to be something like, 37x Z's and zeros or whatever. But anyway, his question is a very good one, in fact. If you had to start training from zero, what would your approach be and what changes would you make? That's a really interesting question. Um, because everybody who gets to a higher level of lifting, you find out new stuff that is applicable to you as more of an advanced lifter, intermediate lifter, wherever the hell you happen to be. Anyway, you find stuff out throughout your training, and these seem like really cool things that you're excited about. So you have to watch out that you don't kind of project that back onto every level of training. A lot of people kind of forget where they came from, so to speak. So I have to try to be mindful of not modifying things too much. So to answer that question, I've kind of answered this before, but let me just go ahead and give you an overview of what I did to start out so you know what I'd modify. So what I actually did, I think I was 14 or so when I first started exercising. I was a chubby 14-year-old. I was like actually about what I weigh now. I'm like 219, I'm cutting. Um, I was like 215, zero muscle mass, all chub. Um, so what I did then, I simply started skipping meals. I didn't know anything about fasting or anything. I just figured, well, if I don't eat, then I lose weight. And I lost 60 pounds in the first semester of was it like ninth grade or whatever it was. And basically I would just do push-ups and sit-ups. I think every other day I would just do max push, like one set, max push-ups, max sit-ups, and then I started doing pull-ups on the tree branch. I couldn't do them at first, and my dad told me to just jump up and lower yourself down slowly, and lo and behold, that worked. And so that was kind of my routine first, just push-ups, uh, sit-ups, and eventually pull-ups, and then eventually I started running. Then from that I got into judo, which incorporated both, obviously, judo training, the as well as some body weight, which put on some muscle. Though I was trying to stay at the 178 class, so I couldn't put on a whole lot. Um, but anyway, basically a bunch of body weight stuff, right? Then we get into me finally starting to lift weights when I entered college, got into the college weight room. Um, I didn't really know anything about weightlifting whatsoever, hadn't read anything, didn't know anything whatsoever. I knew about bench press because everybody knows about bench press. And then from there, I knew I had to train my legs, so I did whatever I found in the gym. I actually used a lot of those football machines, the kind of like plyometric football machines. I forget what you call them, but they let you do kind of like jump squats and stuff like that. I like those a lot. But anyway, I had no idea. I just kind of went in and just bench pressed and did all that stuff. Um, my approach would be called terrible today. In a lot of cases, yeah, I forget how many sets I would do, a bunch of sets. Yeah, I was trying not to fail because I didn't want to get trapped. But other than that, I was trying to push as hard as I could. I did what you could describe as almost an Anderson bench press, because I would kind of pick the weight that I wanted and then gradually work on getting the depth to where it's actually supposed to be to count. Which people would be like, "What are you doing?" They criticize it, but I mean, I was benching two plates legitimately, you know, significantly less than a year after I started. Again, I had a body weight basis. I could do a bunch of push-ups when I first walked in the gym. So I mean, I first walked in the gym, I could do 135. I think I failed with 155 my first try and had to get rescued by a soccer player, which was embarrassing. But I wasn't starting from zero because of obviously the body weight background, right? So anyway, that's it. I'm not going to go into my whole lifting history, but that's kind of what I did at first. I had no idea about like squats or deadlifts or any of that stuff. I was just doing like some kind of random machines and whatnot. Um, okay, so that gives you a brief overview of like what my beginner training was. So as much as it wasn't what I would necessarily recommend, um, it worked very well for what it did. And I'm not going to just go in there and tell you to change every single aspect of it, right? What I would change, I would shorten the body weight phase. So I was doing basically just body weight from like 14 to 18. That's too long. I like the recommendation of not mastering, but just getting a good basis, good foundation in general fitness and body weight exercise before lifting weights. I know some people are going to say that's gatekeeping. That's, you know, you people can just lift right off the bat. And I mean, obviously, in some circumstances, like if you have someone that's really obese and they just can't do body weight stuff, maybe weightlifting right off the bat would make more sense. But I generally like the recommendation for most people: get your basic foundation of physical fitness, right? I think I would, I would say, a man ought to be able to do 50 push-ups. I don't care about like, some good numbers. I don't know. It's a good number of sit-ups. Who cares? Whatever. Like you should be able to do sit-ups and all that good stuff. Maybe, 5 pull-ups, say, and then you should just be able to run a mile. I don't care how fast. You should just be able to run without stopping for a mile. That's pretty basic. It's something everybody should be able to do, I think. I mean, obviously, unless you have like whatever. Anyway, those are just some general guidelines. I think it's good to have that foundation of just general physical fitness before you get into more advanced stuff like lifting weights. When you do, what would I modify? Well, I don't want to overwhelm. I mean, what I did was just very like simple, mindless, but it worked. That's fine. I don't want to just completely change all of that and just tell you, okay, now you have to do all this hyper specific stuff and like, be really specialized, do a bunch of stuff advanced people do because you don't need to. Just go in there and just go after the bench press with high effort. That works. Here's what I would add to it. I'm not going to tell you not to bench press. Obviously, the bench press is great. I would definitely have you squat. What I would have you do, the main things that I would add for beginners are very light Jefferson curls, not heavy. I'm not talking about heavy at all. I'm talking about like maybe with like a 20-pound dumbbell, like very light. Um, and not we're not pushing ourselves hard or anything. We're just getting some practice with it and just incorporating the ability to move through that range of motion so that um, you're strengthening up that whole posterior chain, including in the odd positions you don't often get to in a lot of other exercises before we get into the heavier exercises that don't get through that range of motion, because in reality conventional deadlift in some ways can be seen as a heavy partial. So why don't we do the full range of motion movement before the heavy partial? And again, I wouldn't have it I wouldn't be trying to go heavy there. I'd just be getting in a little bit of it. By the same token, I would add pullovers because it's important to build that foundation of shoulder mobility, right? A lot of folks, we make a lot of progress real quick. We're benching a lot. The front of our bodies blows up. We get to some pretty heavy weights. And then, 4 or 5 years, shoulder injuries start to become an issue. I would, I would put more emphasis on that to make sure we're, training the muscles on the back half of the body, as well as just getting that overhead mobility, that positioning. That's kind of the main thing. Along with that, I'd probably add some form of uh, like deep knee bend movement, something to get that really deep knee angle with a very light load. Again, same philosophy, same logic. We just want to build that good movement foundation so we don't end up uh, with very strong in some ranges, but not in others. But other than that, it wouldn't be that crazy. I mean, the basics would still hold. We'd be doing squat, back squats, along with some other leg exercises. We'd be doing bench press certainly, alongside overhead press stuff like that. Conventional deadlifts, I wouldn't emphasize that much, but I didn't. Like that's not something that I would have to change for myself because I didn't even know about deadlifts. I didn't start deadlifting until like I think probably my third or fourth year lifting. And most of my early back foundation was all pull-ups and power cleans, and that actually worked really wonderfully. Uh, so I wouldn't have to change that, and I think that works out perfectly fine for a lot of other people. I think a lot of other people would be better served by power cleans, I think, than deadlifts early on. Um, Hope that answers the question. Uh, Kind of longer than I thought. It's already 11 minutes. This is probably going to be a long one. I tend to get long-winded, but yeah, we'll try to give thorough answers. And this isn't a video I'm trying to, have go viral. It's just, for you guys. So hopefully you guys are patient with me and my long-winded answers. Okay. Napa Saves the World has two separate questions. Um, how soon do you feel your hamstrings engage during a Jefferson? During the eccentric or after the stretch of the bottom? That is a good question. Um, I feel them mostly at the bottom. They're definitely involved the whole way, obviously, but I definitely get them a lot more at the bottom. It's definitely the spinal erectors are more involved at the top of the motion. If you've seen any of my recent PRs on it, I have a really bad habit that I'm trying to shake of like not getting my feet set up right to start with, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable just as I break at the back, so I shift my foot. All that to just say my legs are not that loaded, if that makes sense, at the very early part. But yeah, then you get into a deep hamstring stretch at the bottom, and that's kind of the primary muscle that's being worked and the primary limiting factor there at the bottom. Because I mean, the Jefferson curl, it does a lot. It's not a super specialized exercise. It covers a lot of bases really well. But yeah, if you're doing the Jefferson curl correctly, the top part is going to be. It's not a pure hinge. You're not just hinging over. You're trying to deliberately, intentionally round over the back as much as possible for that first part. So that really does put most of the tension on the spinal erectors, and the hamstrings come into play more later on. If you're getting a little sloppy with it and hinging, making it a little bit more of a hinge, then obviously your hamstrings are going to come into play more throughout the rest of it. Second question, how often do you do small body parts as ad hoc workouts? It sounds like whenever possible to try to fit them in between work and parenting. Do you repeat small body parts or small movements or rotate laterally? Um, Good question. I mean, I try to get them in as often as makes sense. I usually like when I'm bulking, I'll like my minimum is once a week. I'm trying to make sure that everything gets trained once a week, so I'm not like skipping neck or skipping forearms or skipping calves. But if I don't get to it more than that, like it's okay, it happens. Like I'm trying to do a lot here, so we got to be realistic, right? I mean, if I were actually hitting my goals, um, like I'd be training more than once a day. Um, I wouldn't be training 7 times a day or 7 times a week rather. I would have more than 7 training sessions each week to really give everything both the specificity and the volume that it needs. But realistically, most times I just train 7 days a week, and that's sometimes I'll double up and then skip a day or what have you, but that's kind of the average. As long as it's getting trained in the week, that's okay. I think there's a myth that some of these body parts need like super high frequency to grow. I do not subscribe to that in the slightest. I think there's no such thing as a workout that becomes effective because you do it more often. Either it stimulates growth or it doesn't. There's nothing that you can do that if you do it once a week will stimulate no growth. But if you do it, 3, 5 times a week, it will stimulate growth. That doesn't work that way. If it's ineffective to do once a week, it's ineffective to do 5 times a week. So if, something that traditionally people say, benefits from growth or from frequency, like calves or forearms, um, okay, I mean, maybe my forearms could be trained, 3 times a week and I'm only doing them once. But if I'm training them effectively, I'm still going to get something out of once. And with calves, actually, I think this frequency thing is nonsense. I mostly have been getting, sometimes I would get 2 calf sessions, mostly one. But the thing is, I was getting my calves sore enough that I wouldn't have wanted to train again for at least like, 4 or 5 days anyway, because they were just staying sore. So anyone who thinks calves, they have genetically bad calves, they just can't grow their calves, I would ask, like, I mean, how sore are your calves after you do a calf workout? Because, I mean, they weren't like that in a lot of more conventional calf training, but the stuff I've been doing this year and the last year was kind of where I was figuring some of this stuff out, and then I just really implemented it this year. To get my calves sore often enough, I mean, ideal perfect world, I would only have been training them 2 times a week, or maybe even like 1.5 times a week is like, give it 4 or 5 days of rest that, cycles around. It's not an even 7 days, right? But yeah, bottom line, quality is going to beat frequency every time. Um, I think forearms I could definitely train more often than that, but just trying to fit everything in a lot of time. Neck especially, because I'm not with the other body parts. I'm kind of advanced, I would say. We're trying to squeeze everything out, so you have to have good quality intensity. Neck is something where I would say I'm not advanced. I'm not in the noob gains phase anymore because I did, like I said, I did judo back in the day, so I don't have like no neck, but I just haven't spent a lot of time doing direct neck work. So that's one area where I think more frequency would benefit me because that's kind of the difference between a stubborn body part, which is one that you're just having difficulty growing, and a lagging body part, which is one that which could just be something that you haven't trained, right? If you just never trained an area, of course it's going to be lagging. And there, I think frequency can just help you catch up. Um, but anyway, I hope that answers that question. Um, and yeah, no, so I wouldn't. If the question is asking like, would I have to go through the whole cycle of every single workout before I repeat one? Not necessarily. Sometimes I might just repeat one because that's what I have the time for. Um, Yeah, because some things like back, in most cases not train more than once a week anyway. So yeah, and then some muscles are just getting multiple days, like just because of the nature of the workouts. Like if I'm doing a dedicated tricep focused arm day, and I'm also doing a back day that heavily involves pullovers, and I'm also doing a shoulder day that heavily involves presses, then my triceps are getting 3 days by accident. And I had a while this I had about a month where my triceps were like just never not sore for a while. But anyway, yeah. I hope that answers the question. Bronze liver 6735. How do arrange exercises together in a workout session? That's really broad. I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Um, Generally speaking, you're going to want to start with whatever exercise you want to emphasize most is going to want to be earlier on because that's when you're most fresh, unless it's something that benefits more from being warmed up. Some exercises, especially the ones that tend to be hard on certain joints, may actually feel better once you've done a couple other exercises to get warmed up. So it kind of depends. If your priority is like just getting your max performance, you may want to schedule it earlier on. And if your priority is, being warmed up, obviously later. All that being said, I find that it doesn't matter as much. One of my things, I try to add a lot of variety in my workouts for a particular body part. I want to cover different functions, different angles. I'm not going to just do four variations of the same thing. We're going to try to get a lot of variety in there. So what I notice is it doesn't matter as much what my order is because I can usually perform pretty well on everything, you know, even if I've already done kind of a widowmaker type set of one thing. The next thing I'm going to do may be so different that I still have fairly good performance, right? That's about the best I can answer that question. Um, Simran G Tuck Healy 3747. Sorry if I butchered that. But I mean, in fairness, like, this stuff isn't spelled, it's not space. You know how this stuff's supposed to read. Anyway, congratulations on 10K. Thank you very much. Do you think Zercher deadlifts off the ground can for high bar squats as well? Also, how would you make Zercher squats more quad dominant? I don't I think what he may be asking is can Zercher deadlifts substitute for high bar squat? To that I would say probably not. They're going to be training completely different body parts. Zercher deadlift is much more posterior chain, not a whole lot of quads. Although I have seen some people do it as more of a quad movement. That kind of depends on your proportions. If you have a really long torso, you can kind of get away with doing it as a quad movement. I don't really like to do it like that because I can't do it like that. I don't think that's the best way to do it necessarily because you're just kind of there's plenty of other quad movements. This is kind of a unique posterior chain movement that hits the erectors really well. Obviously, hamstrings and glutes. That's fantastic for glutes. So more, I don't know why more girls don't do this stuff. I mean, anyway. But it also ties, I think, the lats way more into the movement than most deadlift variations do. And, it gives you a ton of stimulus for upper back. So I mean, just, everything from like down the whole back, everything except calves. The Zercher deadlift is just a fantastic movement. So why not just let it be that and don't worry, hit your quads with something else, And that incidentally is why I stopped doing leg day type splits where you have upper, lower, or whatever the case may be, push pull legs. I don't do leg days anymore. I train the posterior chain with back, and I train the quads um, with something else usually. I split them up because just the movements work so well that I'm not going to just try to have a single leg day. I'd rather train the posterior chain with the back. It just works so much better like that. As far as how to make Zercher squats quad dominant, I mean that's simple. You just have to keep more upright, which is fairly easy with a Zercher position. I don't always do that when I Zercher squat because you can also do it as more of a kind of a hybrid hinge squat, and I think there are some benefits to that as well. You can do it either way, and either way is right, and either way is wrong. But yeah, just make sure your torso stays upright. If you need to, you can always use heel elevation, just like any other squat. But the Zercher squat is actually very easy to make exceedingly quad dominant. You just have to be disciplined and mindful about the tendency to round over because you're going to be able to lift a whole lot more weight if you do round over. That being said, maybe at the end of your quad dominant Zercher squat set, you might cheat a little bit to get a couple extra reps in. Nothing wrong with that, but you just have to be mindful that that's what you're doing so you don't get false progression. You know what I mean? Um, Chesington 918 asks, advice for newer content creators struggling to make videos on fitness when other videos say the exact same thing but with much better perceived quality. That's a great question. My answer, I don't want to seem like a jerk with this. It's going to be blunt. Don't. Don't do it. The fitness space is very saturated right now. Well, honestly, social media in general is super saturated right now. I feel like we're kind of at the top of a bubble where like it's been hyped as something that is such a lucrative career, something that's so important. Influencer marketing is so valuable. Companies want influencers to market their stuff, and everybody's trying to be the next, YouTube celebrity so they can have all the money and fame and all that stuff. That's a bubble. I think people are not buying the stuff influencers selling as much. I think brands are going to start realizing that money they spend on it, that maybe they're spending too much money on influencers for marketing, and influencer marketing is losing its effect, and we don't need to be focused on. I'm not saying they'll ever stop doing that, but I do think it in terms of economics, there's going to be a value adjustment. I think the perceived value has been maybe higher than the actual value is, and there's going to be a correction for that at some point. So I don't know that I would try to make that. Um, I don't know that I would try to make that a thing. But I'm responding to that question. So let me repeat the question so you guys know exactly what I'm responding to. He said advice for new content creators struggling to make videos on fitness when other videos say the exact same but with much better perceived quality. That's what I'm responding to directly. So keep that wording in mind. And yeah, I mean, the market is saturated. There are tons of people, and sometimes it does seem like they're all trying to say the same thing. Um, and that's the issue. Now, what if you have something different to say? Well, that changes things, doesn't it? That's the only reason that I'm able to grow and that I'm having some success in this. I think it's a way harder fight for me than it would have been years ago. The space has changed, but I think it's only the fact that I have something different, something that is both novel and quality. Because I mean, so much of this novelty, let's be real, it's just nonsense that people are making up to sell. Sell whatever product, sell whatever course. They'll just make up some new exercise, and you can see that the only reason they're actually making up that exercise is because like they're, it shows off their physique in a certain way, kind of like how all these girls do an alleged back exercise, but the camera's like, well, where the camera's facing. You know what I mean? A lot of this novelty is just okay. Oh, look, well, when I press my arm to the side that way while doing my exercise, my bicep looks really good, so I get more views. So yeah, like I would say honestly, don't try, man. Um, if you don't have something that's both new and quality to say, it's a saturated market. I don't see a good return on investment for spending a bunch of time if you don't have anything novel to say. That being said, I mean, there are novel things to say. Like, I don't think I've discovered everything that's new. There's other stuff out there that other people aren't figuring out. If you can figure out something where you have a niche where you're either figuring stuff out that no one else is figuring out, or just you're coming up with a better way to do something, or just a better way to communicate it, right? Like Knees Over Toes guy's a great example. Nothing that he is talking about is new. Like he didn't invent any of this stuff really, but he has found a really good way to communicate that um, to a much wider audience than anybody would have thought possible. I don't think anybody would have thought that you could get that many people excited about tib raises and I mean essentially a bunch of like rehab stuff, but he has, and it's worked phenomenally. So if you can find a niche like that, yeah, and yeah, the more specific you get, I think the better you'll be. Because if you try to make a general fitness channel, you're going to be rehashing the same thing over and over again. But there are niches where there are boundaries to be pushed, where there's new terrain to explore, and that's where you're going to find a niche where you can provide valuable information. And when you're the only source on something, people are going to cut you a lot more slack. Like my video quality is terrible. I'm terrible at editing, as you guys saw yesterday with the I mean, hey, I I, I actually wrestled with audio on that video I put up yesterday for hours. I had to remake the whole thing, and then at the end of it, um, I guess somehow the audio on NH's video clicked back on, and I was going to take my kids to the snow that day. I didn't have time to fix it. It had already probably like been in the algorithm long enough; it would have ruined it anyway. So I just had to leave it, right? But people are more forgiving of that with somebody like me because like there are some things that I have to say like about, Jefferson curls. There's nobody else has that information. But yeah, I mean, and I think this is God. I'm going so long. I hope you guys don't mind. This is a really long video. Um, I think honestly, I think that's Revival Fitness's problem. Um, he's been constantly very black pilled, very negative, saying he doesn't have a very positive view on the industry. But the thing is, he's just another young guy trying to make general fitness content and a saturated industry. So I think he's very black pilled on it. But at the end of the day, he's not doing anything. Like, why would anyone give him their attention when there is already a ton of content that's the same as his? He's not reinventing the wheel. He doesn't have any more helpful strategies that anyone else does. So I think you're going to get probably demoralized like that if you do try to just rehash the same thing and hope that you're going to be successful, whether financially or otherwise. I hope that wasn't too demoralizing. I'm not trying to discourage you or anything, not at all. Like I'm just trying to be realistic. Um, it's a saturated industry, so if you don't have like a niche where you do have novel information or just something that's a better quality, it's going to be hard. I'm not going to lie to you. Hope that wasn't too black going, guys. I'm really not trying to discourage. Um, See, I really was sick. I first cough at 30 minutes in. I'm getting over it, but yeah. Anyway, okay. This is run really long. Um, all right. Napa saves the world. 4757. Have you ever tried an easy strength a la Don John approach to odd lifts, a high frequency but with comparative low intensity per day? I'm playing around with one hand deadlifts with my next round of easy strength, and I don't know if I'm signing myself up for tendon issues. So I have not personally done that because that's just not a training style that I really follow. I mean, I'm primarily still training like a bodybuilder basically, so I'm just trying to smoke the relevant muscles and then wait and let them recover. That being said, it probably works really well because I mean that's pretty much what the old time strongmen did. But just kind of keep in mind what their considerations were. I mean, the strongmen were performing. They were performers, right? If they were contracted in a particular city, they might do performances every single night or multiple nights a week. So they pretty much had to be good to go at any time. Obviously, their feats required a lot of practice, which informed their training style. So they're not taking anything to failure because obviously they need to be able to perform, every night in a lot of cases. Um, so they just need to be able to, keep up at a high level of practice and strength. And I think that style worked really well for them. But on the flip side, like that's how they're making their money. So when they're not performing, they have all day to train, right? For me, I don't make my money purely through strength performances, obviously. So I just don't have the time to, train every lift at a low intensity each day. It just wouldn't work for my life. Um, and I don't necessarily know if that is the best way to put on mass. I'm not saying it won't, but what people tend to focus more on is actually just bodybuilding style workouts, training to failure, and then recover. That being said, I mean, I think so. I think probably a lot of the guys would have done more like training until they became famous, and then their workout style is like performing strongman may have been different from how they built it up, if that makes sense. As far as specifically the one hand deadlift, I need a lot of recovery time between one hand deadlifts. Once a week wouldn't work for me. At minimum, I need like every other week. One thing that I've done a lot is training one hand one week, one hand the next week. Um, that being said, I'm probably pushing them too hard for that to work. And if you did work up to like a lower intensity, quite shy of failure, no, let's say your max is 400 and you do 315 every day, I would imagine that'd be a good way to build up um, a certain level of durability. So it probably would work, but you'll have to play around with it and see because I've never actually tried that myself. It just doesn't work for my life. Okay. Lolek 080195. How to avoid program hopping when life, busy, work, kids. I don't know if you hear in the background. I think mine just came home from a little outing. Make it really hard to stick to one schedule, or how to be consistent when flexible is needed. Just don't care about it and stuff as much work in as possible. Okay, so I mean, program hopping is easy. You just have to not do it. I mean, stick with what you're doing. Just don't go on to a different program. Um, yeah, keep doing it. As far as how to be consistent but flexible, hold on. Okay, so as far as how to be consistent when being flexible is needed, I've got a little bit more uh, valuable advice on that. Just like have a list of what you need to do um, with priorities, and then just slot it in when time becomes available. You're not going to be able to probably stick to a consistent schedule of, okay, this is my back day, this is my chest day, this is my neck day, whatever the case may be. But you have to get, what workouts you have to get each week, and which time, how much time each one needs, and kind of the order, like which one have you not performed in the longest. So based on that, you can decide what to do. Let's say I get a 30-minute time slot. Well, my workouts that can fit into that are, let's say neck, forearms, calves, maybe arms, depending on how you're training them. Okay, well, the one that I haven't trained in the longest is neck, so we're going to do neck right now, right? Oh, cool. I got an hour time slot. Okay, well, what do I need to throw in here? Well, I haven't done, I just did back, so I don't need to do that again. The one I haven't done in longest that I need that for is, chest and arms. Okay, so it's chest and arm day, right? So your days can switch, and get flip flopped and get all over the place, but you're still covering everything. You're just fitting the workouts into the time that you have available. I mean, it requires some flexibility, but honestly, if you just don't think about it too much, it doesn't bother you. Um, you're still hitting all your bases, and maybe sometimes your workouts get offset. Like, you start off training, Monday through uh, Saturday, and then next the same thing that you train Monday, and maybe you don't hit it till Tuesday or Wednesday, but you're still getting everything done. Um, just keep that rotation, and don't start repeating anything until you've gotten through everything, because then you're going to be skipping stuff. That's pretty much it. Because you will have those time blocks, especially the short ones. So having valuable workouts that you can fit into, like, you know 30, even 20 minutes, that'll drastically increase your ability to actually get it done. And don't worry about all these like health freaks that are telling you not to do energy drinks, man. Get it in. Like, you need to chug a monster, do it. Get that calorie free one. Get those artificial sweeteners. I mostly try to do paleo, but look, what's most important? Like, getting your exercise in. So, like, whatever the hell you need to take short of meth, don't do meth, but whatever you need to take short of meth to get those workouts in, just okay, I got 30 minutes, crack that monster and get after it. You know what I mean? Okay. Next question from Mohammedab 481. Sorry for butchering that. Thoughts on homeschooling? By the way, you seem like an amazing father, and hope one day to be like you as a father first and a lifter second. Well, thank you, my friend. I really appreciate that. I mean, I really wish I could show more of my kids. I mean, I've got the cutest videos from yesterday. I took the kids up to see the last snow of the season. Usually, a lot of times on my wife's work days when I have the kids, I try to get them out of the home into nature, and um, that's a really amazing thing. I really recommend that everyone just do that, especially when you have that toddler stage. They talk about the terrible twos and whatnot. Um, they're only terrible if you keep them in the home where you own everything they're going to try to destroy. Um, you find you take them outside somewhere like legitimately, nature oriented. They listen more because they know that things are more serious, and they just play. It's just a great experience. Like, you're always tempted to, I'm just going to stay here today because I want an easy day. They're not going to give you an easy day. Okay. they're not going to let you nap. They're not going to let you chill. Like you're going to be working just as hard, so you might as well take them out there. Sorry, I didn't even answer the question, but hopefully that was still appreciated. Super cute videos. And if I hadn't done it yesterday, I wouldn't have seen like my 2 year old. It's probably the last snow of the season. We'd gone up to the snow, but we hadn't actually seen it falling. At, so if I hadn't done that, I realized afterwards. Well, she probably wouldn't have seen snow as a 2 year old, and I wouldn't have memories of her in the snow as a 2 year old. Like in falling snow, right? Um, and I almost didn't go because I wanted a chill day, kind of like I was talking about. But you got to just do it anyway. These kids practically grew up under a waterfall over the summer because that's just honestly it kind of just made it easier because they you take them up the waterfall trail and they'll play under a waterfall, really picturesque. Anyway, homeschooling. I'm all in favor of it. I think it's a great idea. If you have the time or you're if you're able to do it, I think it's great. I think probably the best way to do it is if you have a community of like-minded folks who can help, so it's not all just like one parent, because a lot of this stuff becomes hard because we're trying to do everything as atomized individuals when historically obviously you would have family, friends, town, like a network to raise your kids instead of just two individuals, or in many cases one individual now, unfortunately, which just doesn't work. Yeah, I think homeschooling is great. I think research shows that it's actually beneficial in many cases to delay school to like 7 years old. Like it's actually better for kids' brain development to just run around and play when they're 5. You know, who would have thought? Like you know, kids are actually doing what they're supposed to do. Um, so yeah, homeschool is probably a good idea there. And I mean, without getting too political, you know, you don't know what they're teaching these kids at the public schools. It changes every year. It seems like it's constantly getting more drastic. And like why wouldn't you want to have personal, control over your kids' education? Of course, it's a positive thing. Um, and with the decline of, I mean, there's an obvious decline in the value of education now. Um, a lot of companies are agreeing that they don't actually require college degrees for jobs that previously required a college degree because, kind of like we talked about earlier, that was a bubble. The college degree was kind of a bubble, and the market is correcting. We're now realizing that it wasn't as valuable as it was being perceived. It didn't, it's just kind of, now a lot of smarter people are realizing that hey, that's it doesn't make. I guess college used to be kind of an IQ test in a way because I mean the entrance exams literally are an IQ test. So employers, I don't know if you know, but employers are not allowed to use IQ tests to as qualification for hiring. But if you use college, well, that's basically an IQ test because the entrance exam is. But now, I mean, it's almost like a reverse because like only, I mean, you don't have to be that smart to realize that going like $100,000 in debt for something that isn't going to lead to something that's going to pay you $100,000 ever. I mean, so it doesn't. Yeah, all that to say, yeah, I think homeschooling is a fantastic idea. And that doesn't mean you have to adhere to any particular religion. I'm not trying to say keep your kids home and like teach them about like whatever religion, because back in the day, homeschooling had this association with like probably if someone was homeschooling, like their parents had some really weird beliefs. And that may have been just a nasty stereotype. It may not, it probably wasn't true, but I think these days more and more it's like parents don't even necessarily aren't even that serious about religion. It's just like don't trust public schools, and I think that's entirely fair. And yeah, so I think homeschooling is definitely a positive thing, but I mean, you probably need to just make sure you have a way to get your kids that social interaction. Ideally, find some kind of a co-op type situation where other parents will participate in your homeschooling that you trust, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Skillzilla 111 asks, what causes training plateaus? Does it have to do with exercise selection and always doing the same 4 lifts? Yes. So plateaus can come at various different stages. there are various different reasons for and yeah, I mean always doing the same thing can definitely cause it. Um I think in a lot of cases what happens with the plateau is generally the adaptations you're making, like the muscular strength, the skill, um, whatever the case may be, that you get from practicing the lift, start to get overshadowed by uh, the repeated stress on the exact same structures. This is going to be more true for like advanced plateaus, much more true for advanced people. But eventually, you may even be getting stronger overall, but you're hammering the same joints, every week. So even if you're getting stronger and more skilled at that lift, eventually the fact that you're hammering the same elbows or wrists or whatever the case may be in the exact same way is going to weaken you at that lift, and you're either going to stay stagnant or not progress. Um, and yeah, that's probably the number one cause I would say of a plateau, uh, especially for advanced people. I mean, the other cause would simply be, if you're not eating enough calories, your body's simply not going to put on more muscle and more strength. So why would you increase your lifts if you're not actually growing muscle? And yeah, I mean, just changing it up can definitely defeat that because you're not stressing the exact same points anymore. And you'll be surprised how little you can change it and bypass that issue entirely. If you're, I mean, if Zercher squats are just stressing you too much because you've been hammering them too much, maybe switching to a, front squat or a back squat, might be enough to completely bypass that issue, right? And yeah, so I think the other issue, I'm not even going to try to rank these in importance. The other one would be you're simply you're building up, one area as much as it possibly can be without some other area to compensate. So if you're only focusing on, one particular muscle group and you haven't really been doing enough variety to help some of the other muscles that assist, but are probably not going to be directly built by that exercise, if that makes sense. Something that's probably going to be helpful or necessary for maximum performance on that exercise, but isn't really maximally built by that exercise. You probably need to change it up to build those capabilities with something that's more suitable to building them, and then you'll come back and now you'll have them, and now you'll have a higher ceiling. Does that make sense? Okay. Dravok asks, anything you recommend for people consuming a mostly plant-based diet and want to pursue bodybuilding, strength, strongman style of lifting? Okay, so you said mostly plant-based. If it is truly plant-based, I mean, you're just gonna have to get the best protein supplement you can and just go with it. Um, it's not optimal, it's not ideal, but some people feel that's what they have to do, so you got to do it, right? Um, I would urge such people to look into um, the actual argument. I don't know if it's I mean, if if it's an ethical thing, like you just feel okay, it's just wrong for me to eat animals. Okay, whatever, I can't argue with that. If it's more of an environmental thing, I would really urge you to look into the actual net environmental impacts of a lot of the plants that are commonly used by vegans and vegetarians, and compare that not just to um, conventional agriculture, but to the potential environmental impact of good regenerative agriculture, which is basically, cows grazing on an actual ecosystem. You drive through rural California, you see cows out there um, grazing on a hillside. It's poppy some parts of the year, other times it's grass. You get cows out there on the hillside. That's an ecosystem. You have all sorts of mice, birds, insects, all sorts of stuff. Right now, like I said, you'll see the poppies, the lupines blooming. They're really pretty. So that's an ecosystem. So you're raising an animal on an ecosystem, and the animal's part of the ecosystem. They're adding fertilizer and all sorts of things like that. Okay, and then you drive a little further past Bakersfield, and then you get into some of the feedlot. cattle, and it's kind of like you're in Mordor, you know. It's like it smells horrible. There's this oppressive gloom. It's really like when you drive past when you drive up the five past Fraser Park, which is really pretty, and you do see occasionally the cows on the little slopes and all, and it's all picturesque. I mean, it really is like entering like a World of Warcraft zone that's supposed to be like undead or whatever, because you get that haze that like you know, it's like the lighting changes, it's like the haze, it's like all that everything changes. Then you see the feedlots, and it's just like barren dirt. It's just oppressive. There's like a cloud of toxic whatever hanging over it. It's a whole different thing. So um, compare the environmental impact of properly raised animals against you know monocrop agriculture that's used for most vegan food, and um, yeah, it's really hard to argue that we shouldn't be eating something for that can just live in an ecosystem, you know, and not be you know destroying ecosystems for food. I mean, cows really are just an efficient way to use the land without destroying the land. And the same can work for pigs and chickens. I mean, if you're raising chickens as part of a proper, like legit organic farm where the chicken's just running around in the vegetables, just picking the bugs in the vegetables, I mean, what's your environmental impact there? Not a whole lot. Or I possibly net positive. Well, probably not. I'm not going to say that, but I think with some of the well, whatever. Anyway, we're looking at a completely different environmental impact for animals that are actually raised properly relative to the more standard meat methods, which I agree are inhumane. They're not healthy. They do have a negative environmental impact, although I do think, especially with the cows, I think that is exaggerated for political reasons. Like the standards that they use when counting everything that goes into the cow production process. I don't feel like I don't think they're using they're counting it differently than the way they uh, would count anything else to try to just count as much carbon against cows as possible. But either way, either way, feedlot cattle. I don't like to see cows in that environment. I try to buy the grass fed organic whenever possible, and not just that. Like you get something a lot, you get the higher end stuff that actually is like legit. You actually do have a cow that probably had a pretty good life and probably lived on an ecosystem that is not bad for the environment. But that's not what you asked, buddy. So I'm sorry. I put a little bit extra into what you asked. Listen, man. That all that being said, I'm not trying to bash you for wanting to do plant based if that's what you want. And like I said, you might be, some people just feel like it is not okay for me to eat a living creature. Okay, well, I got nothing to say to that. What I will tell you is there's no reason, especially if you're mostly plant based, if you're willing to eat some animal products, you're in the clear. Like people get way too hardcore about diet. They put too much of their identity into what they eat. Like, oh, I'm carnivore. Okay, like okay, did you go out and kill the animal? Okay, so you're not really a carnivore. You're more like a scavenger. Because guess what? Vultures eat animals too, but no one vultures don't get the same respect as a lion. The animals that get respect are the ones that do something that we think is impressive, right? Like, lions or whatnot. We don't really respect the vulture especially much because they eat meat, even though they do. And all that to say, I mean, look at somebody like Jack LaLanne, mostly plant based, but I believe he ate fish and probably some dairy and egg, probably dairy and eggs too. So if you're willing, if you can get into dairy, I mean, you're golden. Like I don't care that you're mostly plant based. If you can do dairy, you can you can get just as good gains as anybody else. Cottage cheese is probably going to be my top recommendation because it's so high in protein. But whatever you need to, whatever dairy you like, that's gonna. I mean, you're good to go. If you're doing eggs, I mean, oh, fantastic. You're fine. Um, And if your thing allows fish, then obviously fish are good for you. Obviously, you try to get the wild caught, the good stuff. But yeah, if you can do dairy and you can eat cottage cheese by the tub, um, any issues that you have with gains do not come from your diet; they come from training. So don't let anyone like, oh, if you're not eating like purely red meat, you're not whatever. Now, I'm not against red meat. Obviously, I just made a compelling argument for it, but I mean, at the end of the day, bodybuilding is about training. It's not about diet. And I mean, there are people who do get good results on a vegan diet. I definitely don't recommend it. You're doing it the hard way. But if for some reason you feel like ethically compelled to do that, and you've really looked at I think if you're doing it for the environment, you may need to really do your research. But if you're doing it just because I'm not going to eat a living thing, okay, I got nothing I can say against that. Okay, that was way longer than it should. This is going to be a really long video, guys. Uh, my okay, Red 9903 asks, "What is your goal physique, and how important is it to have one?" These are really good questions. I hope people actually get to get this far. Eh, in all this rambling and actually get to them. My goal physique is, I mean, I would have to say basically the Farnese Hercules. Yeah, you guys have all probably seen the statue, the Farnese Hercules. I would just, yeah, basically the Farnese Hercules, except with one um, minor change. I think you guys can all figure out what change that would be because I would have to shrink something to get there, and I don't know how to do that, and I wouldn't really honestly want to. But that being said, like don't make fun of the guy because the ancient Greeks had I mean they had levels of Sigma grind set that are just lost to the world, and I think may never be recovered. I mean that the dude who sat for that statue is probably like, hey bro, listen, bro, can you can you do me a favor and make my dick look smaller? Because I don't want the homies to have to look like a big flopping dick. You make it look real small just for the homies. Like I don't want them to have to see all that. And he's like, yeah, I got you, bro. Like, can you imagine that? They have just such a disdain for the interest of females. Like, I don't who who cares what a hoe wants? I don't want the homies to have to look at make it small. I don't want the homies to have to look at all that. I mean that's something that's been lost to the world. We don't have that level of just pure sigma chat energy in the world anymore, and it's unfortunate. Don't go mocking all that. Just you got to understand the mentality behind it, and that's something that unfortunately, like I would not be able to say. I wouldn't be able to say that to a sculptor. But back in the day they did. It's like, yeah, man, just I don't even want the homies to have to look at it, man. Yeah, there you go. You got you, yeah, I got you, man. And that's how it went. That was their culture. And obviously, this is a complete and accurate representation of their culture. Yeah. But yeah, the Farnese Hercules, I think that is that's a good goal for me, just because that's the build I have. Like, I don't have the Steve Reeves type, really narrow waisted look. I have much more of the look like the Farnese Hercules or Eugene Sandow or a lot of the Bronze Era strongmen with. I mean, I think I have pretty wide shoulders, but I also have just a really wide, blocky waist. Nothing I do will ever get me that like narrow V taper look that that some of the bodybuilders have. So I got to just embrace that, just build the massive obliques and just build everything up to match, and that's going to be my ideal aesthetic. And I think I'm making good strides towards that. I think I'm in some areas I'm there. And actually, this year I've been really trying to bring up the areas that I need for that. Like calves have been a big focus because that's probably the number one area that I'm lacking from that Varney's Hercules ideal. But I've built up my calves a lot over the last 2 years, so we're not. I'm not on his level yet, but they're not. I definitely don't have small calves anymore. They're definitely a lot more athletic looking. They're not like they're not a they're not a key selling point of my physique yet. They're not like the oh that's my best body part, but they're definitely not a weakness anymore. So we're making progress there, and I do think it's important. It can help to have somebody to compare yourself against to see what's lacking. By the same token, I've tried to make triceps a big focus this year because one area where I'm a little bit lacking is arms. The guy's not, let's see, can we see this? Yeah, yeah. I mean, Farney's Hercules, he's not Arnold. He's not. He probably didn't have like 20-inch biceps, but his arms look powerful, and I just want to make sure my arms are up there to match with that. Probably neck. I need some more neck, definitely. I've been working on that, right? Um, Rear delts as well. Kind of flows in with triceps. Just makes that whole back aesthetic, just look really powerful. Um, so yeah, I have kind of been letting that inform my training decisions and what I maximize the most. Like, do I necessarily need to be super focused on my chest? Not really. I mean, my chest is already fine. Um, and some people say I have a weak chest, but okay, whatever. Like it looks great in certain poses, but I never pose it that way because I don't care. That being said, with the goal physiques, you have to watch out. You have to make sure that you like pick your goal physique carefully. Like really look at your structure and try to pick a goal physique that looks like you. Because if you try to pick somebody with a completely different structure, it's not going to work. If a guy like me tries to pick Steve Reeves, I will never look like Steve Reeves. I can't look like Steve Reeves, and I would look silly if I tried. I've seen pictures of this. I may put this guy on blast at some point because he said some dumb things. I've got a picture of this one guy who basically tried that. He kind of tried the Steve Reeves thing without having the frame for it. He looks ridiculous. And what I mean by that is he's a traplet. He didn't train traps. He's like trying to minimize his waist and his obliques and everything. Um, and as a result, he almost has an hourglass figure, which is not what you want as a man. Like you can't just not train your obliques and you're gonna look like Steve Reeves. Steve Reeves looked like Steve Reeves because he had like the narrowest hips in the history of mankind. He could have trained his obliques and gotten them, very powerful, and he still would have had a tiny waist and a good V taper. He could have trained his traps and had like massive yoked up traps, and he still would have had broad shoulders. That's just his bone structure. So when someone who doesn't have that bone structure tries it, it looks really bad, honestly. So don't do that. You gotta train for yourself, maximize your muscle. You have that narrow hips, wide shoulders. Okay, you build everything, you're still gonna have narrow hips, wide shoulders. You have the block of your strongman physique, embrace it. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a perfectly good aesthetic. I think it was a mistake to say there's only one aesthetic. Like everyone has to look like a cartoon character. Okay, like what about the classical ideals? Like, well, why is it wrong to look like the Farnese Hercules or Sandow. I mean, the trophy for bodybuilding is a statue of Sandow. Like he didn't have a V taper. He was built like a fridge, like a very aesthetic rip fridge, but you know, dude was straight up and down. There's no V there. I mean, powerful back. I mean, all these guys, had incredibly powerful backs, and that's something I aspire to as well. But you can have lats all day, but if you have that certain structure, you're not going to have that quite that V taper, even if you have a much more powerful back than Steve Reeves. And by the way, I think Steve Reeves, could have really done a lot more to thicken up his back. He had a good width, but I mean the thickness, honestly, a little bit lacking. Okay, so yeah, just make sure your goal physique fits. And but again, if you do have like a build like Steve Reeves, you shouldn't try to look like the Farnese Hercules because you never will. You can build all the obliques you want, you're just not going to have that look. So just pick a look that is something you're suited for and go for it. Okay. Tio3328 asks, how was your Jefferson curl progression? I feel like the lift is one of those that's always reminding you of the progressive nature of training, and I would like to know how the process was for you in terms of progress, time frame until you reached your current level, which is sick AF, by the way. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, let me tell you. So I first found Jefferson curls, I believe, late 2020. I think it was either late 2020 or 2021 when I first started training them. I'd like messed around with them here and there, but when I first started taking them seriously, doing them like every week, I believe it was in 2021 actually. Um, Anyway, yeah, at that time I was strictly sticking with the empty bar. I wasn't doing the Zercher variation you guys see now because I didn't have to. If you're using the empty bar, it works fine to just hold in the deadlift grip. And by the way, that's what I recommend if you're not doing a lot of weight, because I think it does make it a little bit easier to get that reach with your shoulders. I think it kind of cues that a little bit more naturally. Everybody goes to the Zercher style because it's more convenient once you load up heavy weight. Do you really want to like load up 200 pounds and then like climb up on a bench or something to do Jefferson curls? No, it's inconvenient. It's probably dangerous. You just use the Zercher. But for lighter weights, yeah, definitely use the hands grip. I think that helps you master the technique a little bit better. Anyway, yeah, so it was like at least a month. I did nothing but the empty bar. Just just working on form, just trying to really deliberately round sequentially every section of the spine, keeping legs straight, just good form. Not really pushing the intensity, trying to go to failure or anything like that. Just working on form, and then eventually, gradually, I started working up in very, very small increments. We're talking like the first increment was like I literally put on the 2.5 pound plates. Like that's how small of an increase I made. No, so for a couple months, it was like we're getting 2.5 pound plates, 5 pound plates, like 10 pound plates. Still small increases. I think after it was probably in the half a year to a year range, I finally worked up to 135. After that, I accelerated a little bit, got through the 100s. Really, I would say it's probably like somewhere, not maybe not quite there, but somewhere closer to the between the 1 and 2 year mark. I probably finally got into like the twos, I think. And then after that, I started pushing things a little bit faster. And a lot of this is based on feel. Like if I'd pushed early on, it would not have worked well. I would have gotten injured. I promise you that. You know, uh, it takes some time. This isn't like bench press where you just go in, hit whatever your max is, and then add 5 pounds next time. Like you need your structures need some time to adapt. Um, I think you need to give yourself a little bit of time for it, and that's what I did, and that's what worked. But eventually, it felt like, yeah, okay, yeah, I can push this. I can start pushing this more aggressively, and then I did. Um, Started taking a little bit bigger jumps, just pushing it harder, and eventually, at that time where I started working into the 200s, I started going a little bit closer to failure, and then eventually, I have started doing sets to failure, and that's more around like maybe like 3 year mark. I've started actually doing sets to failure. And even though my progression was really slow at first, I was still making visible muscular increases that obviously accelerated when I started really training it as more of a serious bodybuilding lift, you know, doing sets in the twos to failure, right? Or close to not, we're not talking like just pure like muscular failure. We're talking more like technical failure, right? Like if I get to the point where I have to, if I'm trying to complete the last rep and my knees have to bend, okay, that's technical failure. Set's over, right? Hope um, that kind of explained things. Harris Araf Harris Sharaf, sorry, asked, "What motivates you to keep doing the things you keep doing?" Well, kind of a lot of things, you know. I mean, right now with some of the stuff, I feel like I'm exploring uncharted territory. I feel like I'm exploring things that just, or maybe re-exploring things that just have not been explored in a while. Like, we just talked about Jefferson curls. I'm pushing weights to levels that you know, a lot of people, would not have thought would ever work. And I'm doing it and showing that it can be done safely, which is not to say that I recommend anyone do it, but it's still uncharted territory. We're doing something new. It's not new, it's old, but we don't have that much record of what people were doing back in the day, so it seems new because we don't know. I'm sure John Kermack did more Jefferson curl more than I have back in the day, but I have no idea what his max weight was, so it's new to me. And it's new to most of the fitness industry, and that's a lot of fun. Um, that's one aspect of it. Another big one is that, a lot of people are kind of relying on this fitness thing, this bodybuilding thing. It's a big part of how people are getting through their lives. It's really I don't know where I'm getting this term, but it's a surrogate activity that allows people to go through the power process, and that really helps people. I mean, you see all the memes about we're in there fighting our demons, and I don't ever see any demons when I'm exercising, but like people do this stuff for their mental health, and that makes it very demoralizing when you do get to a point where you've put 5, 6, 7 years into this thing, and you've come to rely on this thing, the progress that you're making, not so much like where you are right now, but you've come to rely on that progress for your mental health. Like that's what keeps you going, and then the progress runs out, and you were relying on that. Now what do you do? So that's a big part of what motivates me, because that's demoralizing. And well, there are ways to keep going up, but they're not conventional ways. They're not ways that are commonly talked about. So that's a big part of why I'm so passionate about learning and exploring and sharing um, ways to continue to make progress once it's stalled. Because I mean, you see a lot of people get black pilled. Okay, is this my natty limit? Should I go on the sauce? Well, I don't want anyone forced to make that decision because they feel like there's nothing left for them to do naturally. Now, if certain people just say, look, man, I need to deadlift 1,000 pounds. I want to be in the NFL. I want to be a pro wrestler, whatever the case may be. Like you have a particular goal that requires you to go on sauce. Okay, that's a whole different story. I'm not even against that. I wouldn't even necessarily advise against it in all cases. I think there are probably some cases where legitimately that is the right case, the right choice for somebody who has, a bunch of potential to do something really cool that can especially make them, life changing money. I'm not going to tell you no, right? But I don't want people to hit the end of the rope and feel like, okay, like there's nothing left for me, but I really need this progress. I need to go on, or maybe just give up, or maybe start doing drugs or whatever the case may be, or just being sad, and I think that's a big thing because so much of the fitness industry really does cater towards the beginner because that's where all the money is. There's, I think a lot of people who have done all the right stuff to get to that, late intermediate, early advanced stage, just are kind of uncatered to. So that's a big part of why I like to, um, really explore this stuff and try to put out, ways to keep that progress going, keep the interest level, keep that feeling going. Because it's not always about just going in the gym and killing yourself on a workout and okay, now I have endorphins and that feels good. That's temporary, like that high only lasts as long as the workout and a couple hours after, and then you're right back down there. Like what's going to make you feel better, like more consistently, is continued progress and eventually building to abilities that you can really feel proud of, and not everyone can do, and not just I'm at this level, but I'm looking at all these other people who are at this level. Well, you know, not everyone's going to be the best at everything, but I think everyone can get to a level that is genuinely impressive to just about anyone. And I want to explore that, promote that, etc. And then finally, the other thing that keeps me motivated is simply that okay, now I think I actually do have an opportunity to earn a living from this stuff. So now not only um, not only is all that stuff there, but now I've kind of tasted freedom. I feel like I could potentially make a living for this, which would be a much better way for me to make a living in terms of my family. I'm not going to go into any kind of details, but it would be a better life. So, the more and obviously, who doesn't want to make a living doing what they're passionate about? So, you know, especially this year, I've been pushing even harder because that's now a goal of mine. Um, I think hopefully I can actually make. Oh, I've in addition to sales of the book, which have been good, and I appreciate all that. Got a lot of other things in the works that are looking very promising, so I think that's going to be a possibility. I mean, so that's got me pushing now even harder than I would have if it was just a hobby. Now I do have some potential for livelihood riding on it. So yeah, I've been extending myself even more than I ever would have if this were just a hobby. Hope that explains that, and thanks for your question. Okay. Mohammed Nas 2005 asked, how did you adapt your training when in suboptimal conditions like 7 hours of sleep and high life stress? Ignore them. I've never seen those to make any difference whatsoever. I mean, I'm just going to be as honest as I can. I don't know. People talk about that stuff. Maybe it does affect some people more than me. I don't know. Um, it the only, I mean, obviously, it's nice to get sleep, but I haven't noticed that it actually really changes what I can physically do unless it's something crazy like I got 2 hours of sleep. I mean, 5 hours is pretty normal for me. I doesn't mean I'm not miserable because I got 5 hours of sleep, but as far as training goes, you get in there, you get your caffeine, you do the work, and it happens. I haven't noticed that to make a big difference. What I've noticed is just it's if I do the training that should get a particular result, that happens, and if I didn't do the training, it doesn't happen. And I can have slept more or less, but if the training, so I think the main way that um, you know suboptimal sleep or stress is going to impact you is honestly going to be in either keeping you from going to the gym in the first place or making you kind of sandbag through your workouts, not really put that effort in. Honestly, the biggest issue as far as really both of those is that, it's going to limit your creativity, and your ability to work through problems. It's going to be mental rather than physical. Like you might just not be able to experiment with things and work your way through a problem, or if something happens that you're not expecting and you need to adapt to it, if your mind's not there because of sleep deprivation or stress, you're going to have a much harder time just coming up with, okay, so this didn't work out, what do I do instead? Like if you're really stressed and whatnot, you're going to be a little bit lost, and I've noticed that. Probably the biggest way that stress has impacted me, I mean, we're not going to get into it, but I've had like ridiculous stress over the last 4 years, like more than just, oh, I have kids, like we're not going to get into it, but like other stuff. And the only way I've really noticed it actually impact me, like that I can say, okay, this is actually impacting my training, my results, is when it causes me to um, try to select my workouts, select my attempts based on what I need psychologically instead of what would make sense for me physically. So if you're reacting, if I'm reacting to stress by like, okay, look, I really need this PR to get through the week, and I go for something that I probably shouldn't. That's kind of the only impact I've ever really noticed from stress. So I mean, to be honest, I hate to say it because people are gonna call me just being a tough guy, but I think you can kind of just ignore that. You really can. Penumbrium, very, I think, asked my opinion on sandbag exercises, and dude, you've been so consistent in commenting. I really appreciate it. You're on everything, so thank you, dude. Opinion on sandbag exercises. I think they're great. I don't do it that much. I have a sandbag. I do it at the beach sometimes, but I don't really have storage space for it full around here. So I only do it at the beach. But that being said, it's like a turbo Zercher. Like it's kind of like, the sandbag exercises are kind of, if I say I've said before, Zerchers give you an option to do either hinges or squats where you're tying your lats into the movement more. So you're, doing like a deadlift, but you're actually hitting lats to a much greater degree than you would in a conventional deadlift. Sandbags just turbocharge that, as well as, putting a useful element of forearm training in. Um, I think a lot of isometric stuff for forearms may be overrated. Oh my God, what the hell is she doing with a pointer? Anyway, but sandbags, no, I think you will definitely grow bigger forearms if you do a lot of sandbag training. So yeah, I think it's valuable. That being said, I would avoid the trap of just like doing, how should we call it? A lot of functional styles of training where you're just doing like a medley of various things. I would still try to focus on, like, use bodybuilding principles, do sets, do reps, try to go to failure, like train with them in the same way that you would train with a barbell. Don't just do a bunch of random stuff and call it like functional. But as a training tool, if you use it in, more of a bodybuilding style, like absolutely fantastic. Okay. Long Boy asked, "What is your forearm routine?" I'll have to make a whole video on that. I mean, probably longer than I have time for. Although that being said, I've gone through I mean, I don't have anything to demonstrate here. What I will tell you, uh, that's good. I'm gonna I'm gonna do a video on that. But basically, not only do I train, the basic curls, basic wrist curls, and whatnot. I think it's important to train all the other functions of the forearm. So having getting my forearm in here is annoying. So radial and ulnar deviation, which, why are these biomechanics dudes? Why do we have to call it shit like that? Why can't we tell, like putting your wrist this way? And I don't know. Anyway, rotation, all that stuff plays into it. I don't want to. I We have to come up with better names for like the shit you do with your forearms. Like, who the hell wants to say radial and ulnar deviation? But it is important, and no, probably no one does it because no one wants to say all that. Who Deviation? Fuck, I don't want to be a deviant. Um, but it's important, and that stuff not only helps to grow your forearms, but it's also really protective of the elbow. And I would actually say that as much as any tricep exercise is the secret to regrow, to like restarting my stalled tricep progress. Because everyone knows how to grow triceps. They're easy. Like, it's simple, but if your elbow pain is getting in the way, then obviously you can't do a lot of the simple stuff that works, right? Um, anyway, I'll do a video on that later, but just train all the functions. Um, and you'll see if anyone's bought my book, my two favorite mass builders are in that book because they're fairly old school and common exercises. Van Van Javulik asks how to improve scapular control and shoulder stability. Okay, well, that's a big question. As far as scapular control, you could look into some of the muscle control stuff. Um, my coach Lucas Hardy actually he gets into that stuff. I would recommend checking out his channel because he does a bunch of muscular control stuff on and including the scaps and whatnot. I haven't gotten that deep into it, but that's probably where you'd start because you're just kind of mindfully, actively, moving them. You know what I mean? But yeah, check out Luke's stuff. Range of strength, um, and then shoulder stability. I mean, anything where you're stabilizing a load with your shoulder. It can be anything from Turkish get-ups, overhead walks, um, windmills are a great option. All those have various benefits. Just something where you're stabilizing a weight overhead. You know, whatever you do is up to you. I mean, the overhead walk is probably the most accessible, but Turkish get-ups, windmills, stuff like that all have their own benefits as well.